I've been playing Path of Titans for almost 4 years now, and I've been lucky enough to be at the base launch with many of its dinos, Iguanodon, Ceratosaurus and Styracosaurus to name a few. However, being around for so long has also let me see a lot of the dinos undergo many changes, and thankfully, most of them have been extremely positive. Remodels, new attacks, and even passive abilities prove that whilst Alderaan games want to have an immersive dinosaur experience, they also want it to be fun, and the new combat update is further proof of that. But that got me thinking, what are some dinos I want in the game that can provide an immersive yet fun experience? So, I decided to put my two Stego brains together and come up with a handful of dinos that I'd like to see in the game, whilst justifying their inclusion with fun mechanics that differentiate themselves from the already existing roster. That means that the creatures on this list have to be physically different enough to not be mistaken as another, so unfortunately dinos like Tarbo, Cory and Triceratops I tried to avoid. Likewise, I also wanted to avoid creatures that will be coming through mods, which meant dinosaurs like Pachyrhino, Edmonto and Acro were also off the table. Bear in mind, I'm not all-knowing, dinosaurs are constantly changing and I just made this list for fun. So if my ideas seem too far-fetched or dinos on the list aren't viable anymore, remember that this is the same game where a Spino can go head-to-head with a Rex and Buzzbaldia can do this. With all that being said, here are 6 dinosaurs I want to see in Path of Titans. Out of all the dinos on this list, I'm actually surprised that Baryonyx isn't in the game already. I mean, we already have Suko and Spino, so my only assumption is that either the devs told the modders, don't bother because we're going to implement it later, or they think his playstyle would be too similar to Conker's? I'm not really sure. But Baryonyx is cool, so I started to brainstorm anyways, and what I thought of was to basically have Alio, but amphibious. That means in a 1v1, a Barry will most likely lose to other dinos its size, unless it can get its ambush off first. If you don't know, ambush is, at the time of this list's creation, a new ability that Alio, Sarko, and for some reason Campto are getting in the upcoming combat update. It's an attack that outside of combat will activate, ensuring the first attack you land when entering combat will do double damage, which yes, does apply to Sarko's charge bite, which is horrifying. So, let's give this to our favourite bug boy, and, while we're at it, give it a charge slap attack, a la Primordial Tyrant's Theory. This means that in the water, Barry will be a speed demon, making sure that whilst it can't take on other lake dwellers such as Sarko and Spino, it can quickly escape. As for its weaknesses, it'll obviously have poor land mobility, lacking no jump and will be slightly slower than, say, Conker. And outside from its ambush bite and mean right hook, its most frequent attack would be its bite, doing pitiful damage but slightly above average bleed. Side note, I'm being 100% serious when I say I'm surprised it's not already in the game. So does anyone have any info on it? Like, is it currently being made by modders and I just missed it, or are the devs favouring the B-list Barrys like Irritator, since the Isle has Barry and Beast Bermuda has Ichthyovenator? I'm genuinely curious. Who doesn't like Protoceratops? It's like the pug of the dinosaur kingdom. Adorable, yet ugly and grumpy. As for its inclusion to Path of Titans, I think it would be another good addition to the tiny terrors of Pandura, that being Campto, Latin and Dinon. It would be roughly the same power as them as well, if a little stronger. As for abilities, the main one that comes to mind was Bone Break, and before you clasp at your chest in horror and call me a moron, this would only work on dinos of its size, being, once again, Dinon and Latin. So anything larger than the raptors would be completely safe. As for its primary attack, I think just a very strong bite would be fine. I mean, have you seen its beak? It's no wonder that it was thought to have influenced the creation of griffins, which is actually a really cool fact. I definitely recommend looking into it. As for weaknesses, I really don't see it having any, aside from obviously low stats and maybe lower speed, but the fact that it can hide in tunnels to escape from its predators more than makes up for that. Also, it obviously wouldn't have a charge, unlike other ceratopsians, as adorable as seeing a proto collide into Rex toes would be. When writing this list, Orn of the Lesties was originally going to take the spot. However, upon realising I had actually been oversizing it my entire life, I had to find another dinosaur that fit its criteria, and thus the hunt was on. It had to be larger than Latin but smaller than Cerato, as slender as Harara but unique to Path of Titans. And most of all, it had to fit the playstyle I had already envisioned for Orn of the Lesties. Liliiensternus, a rather obscure dino and an old one at that, being, and I really hope I'm right, lest I summon a bunch of actually people in the comments, the first Triassic era dino in the game. It would primarily be a hatchling killer, dealing increased damage to players still in the hatchling to juvenile stages. I know that sounds bad, but Hear me out. When you first start out in Path of Titans, growing out of the juvie stage is pretty easy. You're small enough to hide away in bushes, and the map is so bloody massive that even with 100 players max on a server, if you play even slightly cautiously, you can manage to avoid pretty much everyone. But what if there was a dino that was specifically designed to weed out the players who weren't cautious enough? Enter Liliiensternus. Whilst being quite a pushover of a dinosaur, having less defense than even Dinon, Lily's uniqueness comes from its boastful speed, amazing maneuverability, and its brand new ability, Hatchling Catcher, which, as before mentioned, allows it to deal 2.5 times damage that it would regularly do to fresh spawn dinos. Now obviously a dino this powerful is going to be abused a lot, so it'll need to have a lot of drawbacks. First of all, it should be a complete glass cannon, meaning that any dino outside the adolescent stage need only to think of it as a scavenger. Its low defense and health also mean that it has a very high skill cap, so even face tanking adolescents would be a bad move. And so we finally arrive at the reason why Ornitholestes had to go, and that's its height. As it's taller than dinos such as Meg or the raptors, tunnels around most of the baby zones will be its prey's best friend. Entering tunnels to pursue prey should either be impossible or awkward enough to slow it down, much like current packing. This means that prey still has a minor chance to escape, be it unlikely. If I'm being completely honest, this is the only creature on my list that I'm doubtful would ever make it into the game, at least by my design, but I thought it was a cool idea nonetheless. Also, did I just 5'11 Ornitholestes? When talking about Majungasaurus, only one word comes to mind: cannibalism. Now, before it became the ugly, wiggly subraptor it is today, Legacy Ceratosaurus in the Isle was nothing short of a brute. Whilst it would still rarely win against apexes, old Cerato was undisputably one of the most threatening creatures in the game, but with one major drawback: food drain. In one of the most unique ways of balancing, Ceratosaurus would most often starve to death before anything could manage to kill it, meaning it was constantly on the move, and in doing so, was constantly on the hunt. So, what if we politely borrow that idea whilst embracing Majung's cannibalistic nature? However, giving it an extremely fast food depletion rate would weed out the potential overpopulation of them. As for its passive, I thought of relating it to cannibalism, doing extra damage to others of its own species, but that already may be a thing in the game. Either it's already been in the game for a while and I never noticed because I never played Pycno, or it was just added in the recent combat update, but it appears that Pycno already does just that. My thought process was to have a dinosaur so hungry and vicious that you can't trust a single one. Even within its own species, backstabbing and cannibalism would be completely expected, with the knowledge that you can get an easy meal from just one of your packmates. But if you don't like that concept, I know just how to win you over. Boom. When I was a wee babbin, slipping around in the sewer, Fantasia, specifically Rite of Spring, was one of my favourite pieces of dinosaur media, with one scene in particular always sticking with me. And no, it wasn't the dinosaurs mass dying to dehydration. There's a difference between childhood awe and childhood trauma. There's a scene where a type of hadrosaur, presumably Edmonto, is seen eating lakeweed out of, surprise surprise, a lake. And for some reason I always assumed it was Saurolophus. Because of that, I've always attributed old Saurolophus to swimming, and, if it wasn't already obvious, I really love the swimming mechanics in Path of Titans, so why don't we give old Dinocheirus a little buddy? Being larger than Lamb, but smaller than Bars, I imagine Saurolophus being almost like Zuko's herbivorous counterpart, having enough power to still come out of top in most situations, but still favouring quick escape when the situation looks dire. Keeping the trend of semi-aquatic dinos draining stam faster on land, Saurolophus would always want to keep by some water. However, competition in water can be pretty dire, so to compensate for this, I was thinking of giving it an exclusive call which generates stamina as well as bleed heal. This means that even after being kicked out of its pond, you'd be a monster to do that by the way, you wouldn't be completely vulnerable, unlike most semi-aquatics who could end up with a pretty sizable disadvantage. As for its abilities, I'd like to see it with a flail attack, almost like Primordial Tyrant's Para. The reason I love this ability so much is that it's very awkward to start fights with, but incredibly useful when you're fighting against a wall, a playstyle I think every hadrosaur should have, that being running first, fighting later. As for a second ability, a weaker version of Buzzbaldia's Tail Slam would fit just nicely, acting as a nasty slap on the wrist to any tail-biting carnivores, all whilst being one of the most satisfying moves in the game to land. In terms of balancing, however, Saurolophus' new call would have a pretty hefty cooldown, and would only regain half its stam in one quick burst, as with the bleed heal, halving the timer. The call should only be used as a Hail Mary move, only needing to be activated when caught off guard, like when you just managed to escape a Sarco, only to go running into a nearby Rex. To be completely honest, it's hard for me not to be completely biased when talking about this creature, because out of everything on this list, it's pretty much my most anticipated dinosaur to be added. Think of it as my dinosaur equivalent of Master Chief for Smash. Basically, if I could point to one dinosaur to be added, it would be the semi-aquatic, pool party having Saurolophus. Honourable mentions. These are dinosaurs I wanted to add to the list, but personally couldn't think of any creative gimmicks. Protoceratops. I love Nazuto, but I honestly couldn't think of a playstyle that wasn't just Alberta but weaker or Starako but stronger. Pyroraptor. Everyone loves Pyro, so I'm sure someone has an idea of what it could do, but I could only keep coming back to Dinon but cooler. Saltosaurus. I don't know, I just thought it had a funny name. Okay, when I said Barry was the dino I was most surprised at not being in the game, I lied. How is Mapusaurus not the poster child of Path of Titans? It looks like Giga, sounds like Giga, it even wears the same clothes as Giga, it might even be Giga. It fits all the checkboxes of your regular Path of Titans rep. Obscure enough to be recognised as unique playable in the oceans of dinosaur sims nowadays, but similar enough to a popular dino as to rake in new players. And for the people wondering, why not just add Giga then? These are the same devs who added Triceratops over Triceratops, Pycno over Carno, and Kaweki over Plesio, so I really wouldn't be surprised if Mapusaurus is what we got instead of Giga. For playstyle, I've taken a lot of inspiration from Mapu's appearance from the Chase by Dinosaur miniseries, with bleeding out its prey in an epic hunt rather than Rex's usual brawly playstyle. I really want Mapusaurus to travel in large packs, much like their on-screen depiction, but with no large sauropods to hunt currently, I can't see any reason to encourage a massive gathering of apexes. The creator does that fine just on its own. However, keeping in line with a more stalkerish playstyle, an ability I'd like to see is an attack that deals high damage but also regains a small amount of food. This may sound OP, but to compensate for such a powerful move, this ability would, once again, have a pretty hefty cooldown, meaning it would rarely be used in most scuffles as opposed to hunts. To differ from Rex, Mapusaurus would be a much faster, less beefy hunter, needing to be in a pack of 2 to 3 to be successful. If all this sounds familiar, it's because it's pretty much just Primordial Tyrant's Giga, as apparently all of this video is just a subtle rip-off of all their creations. But seriously though, the reason why Mapusaurus is so high up on this list is because I think it has the best chance of all the others to be added, and I would be all for it, even if it is just Giga in disguise. And that is my list of 6 dinosaurs I want to see added to the game. This video has probably been the one that I've put most time into, and I'm not even sure if it's worth it. Sorry for the later upload for this, but I really wanted this to actually be watchable. I wasn't entirely sure what to do for the actual video itself, because obviously like me talking was pretty much the biggest part of the video, but I wasn't really too sure what to do for the video itself. But I think I struck a good balance with what I did. Just wanted to say, if you've made it this far, please leave a like and a comment, and if you want, subscribe. It really does help grow the channel more. But most of all, I really just want to hear from you guys what dinosaurs you want to see in the game, because I'm sure that there'll be a dinosaur on this list that you'll either go, oh my god, that is the worst thing ever, or maybe, hopefully, one of the dinosaurs on the list made you go, you know what, that's an okay idea. I'm completely brain farting on what I'm supposed to be saying. I just got to upload this video, and this will probably be the last one until the Night Stalker update comes out, because I'm really hyped for that, and because at the moment Path of Titans is in a bit of a dry spell. There's not much going on in it. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye.